Good afternoon. It is right now 3:30, so we will go ahead and get started, and we'll keep admitting people as they come in. And we've dropped the link to a presentation in the chat. You can also see it on the screen. It is go.ncdpi.gov/promptcraft.edu, and the first words are the words are all capitalized in the beginning. And so I'm going to go ahead and get started, start right on time. This session is to help you learn how to prompt effectively to make your ChatGPT or whatever generative AI experience that you're doing more effective and help you to get what you want from your models more quickly. And so I'm going to go ahead and click through. I am Vera Cabero. And it's not moving. My screen is not moving. There it goes. Okay. Okay, and I also have a little temperature check I wanted to do at the beginning, which is a Mentimeter. And so if you don't mind, just join me on menti.com, scan the code, or click that link in the slide that you see here on slide 3, either one of those. And the code is on the screen as well. And this will just kind of help me get a feel for who's in the room and what your experience is so far with AI. And I want to change the screen to that so that you can see that next. And the first one on there should already be available for you on the Mentimeter. And so it is asking what position you hold. I'm going to give you just a second, get a couple more people answering there, and then I'll move it along. I have 3 people answering. Stacy, thank you, has dropped the link to it in the chat. And so if you're not on the Mentimeter, please look for that link in the chat and join me. And so we have 2 teachers, 2 other, okay. ITF, okay. So far, no administrators. I'm going to go ahead and go to the next. I actually have 4 questions here, a little more than I normally do for a warm-up, but will help me get a good feel for the audience. And so I'm going to go ahead and go to the next slide as well. This one is just asking about the grade levels, the grade spans that you serve. And so if you don't mind going ahead and answering that as well. Looks like so far, most everybody serves multiple grade spans, some elementary, some middle, no high school so far. No, okay. I'm going to go ahead and move to the next one then. So we have 4 that serve multiple grade spans. Okay, the next question then, I'll move ahead. This one is a scale question, and so it has 4 different statements, and you can just drag anywhere along the bar between the strongly disagree and the strongly agree. The first one, I considered myself to be knowledgeable about AI or AI literate. The second one, I understand what AI is and have a basic understanding of how it works. The third, I understand the benefits as well as concerns and limitations. And then the last one, I'm comfortable using Gen AI tools in my personal and professional life. And it looks like most of us are pretty proficient, it seems like. Okay, so most people so far seem to be pretty comfortable with AI. Nobody seems to be really new. That's helpful information as well. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next one. The last question is just ranking the tools, and these you can just literally drag them around, with the one that you're most comfortable with being number 1, the one that you're least comfortable with being the last one. And I'll just give you a moment to do that. You're not moving up. Okay. So it looks like as a whole, we are definitely much comfortable with ChatGPT, and that is typical. That's what we normally see, but that's good information for me. So I appreciate you playing along and giving me that information. So we've got a Perplexity fan in the rising there, somebody in Microsoft Copilot. Okay, so we don't normally see that. That's kind of a unusual one. So. All right, good information. I appreciate you doing that. And we'll go ahead and dive in and get started. with the presentation now. First of all, it looks like most of the people in the group already have some idea about generative AI, but it really can be like a superpower, something that can really help you in a lot of different ways. It can be like an administrative assistant, definitely a content creation partner, a tutor. It's great for tutoring and it's getting better all the time. Language barrier breaker, collaboration facilitator, research development. Accessibility is great for making things more accessible to students who struggle. And it can definitely be a creativity igniter and a lifelong learning companion, allowing people to learn pretty much anything that they want to learn. And so we're going to talk about how to do that effectively in a minute. My first session last week was a AI 101, and I think it's important that even though we're not doing the basic level, that we all kind of do a little bit of level setting about some of the concerns and considerations. Though we won't spend a lot of time on this because again, session is mostly about prompting, but it's important that everybody who is using AI has some knowledge about these things. So just briefly, as a reminder, when we're using generative AI tools, we do always have to watch for bias because they are trained on the internet. And that means that they have absorbed a lot of biased information from places like Reddit and Twitter and other seedy underbelly places on the internet. And it's gone through a lot of fine tuning, vetting process to kind of improve the content. But we can never, and it's gotten, I will say that it's much, much less biased now than it was a year and a half ago when it first came out. But it is still possible. It's always possible that you'll encounter some kind of a subtle bias in your responses. And then also hallucinations is something we have to be concerned with, which are really just inaccuracies. It's when the model will sometimes, it is basically like a word prediction model, just like in your chat, just as like in your text when you're texting. Sometimes it'll predict a word that is not what you intended. It's basically how these models work as well. And because of that, sometimes they will give you an answer that's not accurate. So it's really incumbent upon the user to always verify the information and make sure that what you're getting is accurate and correct. And then lastly, data privacy is a really big concern, especially in education. We have to be very cognizant of protecting our students' data privacy by never entering any kind of private information into any of the models. And that includes student ID numbers. Those are private information as well. And also, when you're that, we need to also understand that it's more and more like even in ChatGPT now, you can upload files and of course you can paste content in as well. But when you're uploading a file or pasting content in, it is the same as if you're typing it in. And so we have to make sure that we're not ever accidentally uploading a spreadsheet, for example, that may have student identifiers on it to analyze the data, things like that. And then lastly, it's real important that whenever you follow whatever processes and procedures your district has set up about creating student accounts, because when you create or allow students to create accounts on their school accounts, there's always a potential that you are exposing their data. The most common data breaches we have in education are through third-party integrations. So even if it's a sign up with Google or sign up with Microsoft or any of those, signing in with Clever or anything like that, it still could potentially expose that student's data. And so just be sure that you're following whatever procedures your district has. I do know that they've gotten more strict lately because the cybersecurity landscape has gotten more risky lately. And so it sometimes can be a little bit of a hindrance, but it's really important that we do that. And so I always like to just kind of level set and make sure everybody understands those things. But today's session is mostly about prompting. And so to begin with, the most important thing to realize when you're prompting, when you're working with these large language models, is that it is not a search engine. A search engine is just going to be searching a huge database of content that already exists, that people have already created, and it will return a dumpster fire of links, a lot of ads included, And sometimes, thousands of links will come back, but you have the job of having to sort through all of that mess and try to find something that's useful to you, which is very difficult to do. And even if you do find something that you can use, you're generally going to have to make a lot of modifications on it to make it fit your particular students and your particular use case. The difference is with generative AI is it is actually going to generate something new just for you based on the amount of context that you give it and the data that it was trained on. And so using generative AI, you can actually create something custom made, a bespoke tool, a bespoke work, whatever it is that you're working on, that is just for your use case and it is targeted specifically to your students, your class, your situation. And so that makes it much more powerful than just a search engine. But you also have to interact with them differently. And so instead of just using general search terms, you have to do what's called prompting. And prompting is just very simple. It's just communicating with the models using natural language. So just using the English language that you speak every day or whatever language you speak, you can communicate with these models and you can create a variety of things. I heard someone else say, and I can't remember who, one day, that the number one programming language in 2024 is English or whatever language you speak, because that is the only language, that's the only thing that you need to know in order to generate some really fabulous things because of generative AI. And so we're going to talk about prompting. First of all, comparing it to a Google search. As you see here, the first box on this chart is a Google search, just a general search like the lesson plan for Pythagorean theorem in 8th grade. If you put a term like that into a search engine, you're going to get that huge list of links. If you put it into a large language model like ChatGPT, you'll get something that resembles a lesson plan, but it's not going to be targeting your students or your particular situation. And so the difference between that and a prompt is a prompt actually gives a command and tells the model what to do. And we call that a task. And so you're giving a task to the model. And so an example of a prompt, not a good prompt, but a prompt is create a lesson plan to teach 8th grade math students about Pythagorean theorem. And so that is a prompt rather than a search term, but it's not a good prompt. What makes a prompt effective is the amount of context that you include with the prompt. And context can be a wide range of things, and we'll look at it a little more specifically in a minute. But this is an example of a good prompt. You are an expert mathematician skilled at simplifying problems for students. Design an accessible and engaging 60-minute lesson plan to explain the Pythagorean theorem to a mixed ability 8th grade math class. And then I also have included, which I recommend always doing as a teacher, if you know the standard you're trying to teach, you should also always just paste the exact standard in. And so I've pasted in the standard NC8 G8 here. And then I said, make the lesson relevant by including real world applications. Be sure the students have an opportunity to collaborate and use critical thinking skills. And so that is going to net you much better results than just a generic prompt as well. And I do have an example of that prompt here. If would like to explore it a little further, we're going to explore some other prompts further on, but I like to give people examples to go by as well. And so we're going to go ahead and move on to the next slide. And this is something that I created. It's over a year ago now. It's a prompting framework. And you will hear people say that if one of these days you won't need a prompting framework, and that is true. But for now, for the models we have today, you really do still need a prompting framework to kind of learn what kind of things to include in your prompt to get the most effective results. But sometime in the next few months, you probably will not. You'll just be able to, the model will be able to kind of ask you and pry the information from you in order to prompt itself. But for right now, you do need to provide, as I said, lots of context, and context can be a lot of things, but it needs to be clear, specific details to help the AI complete the task. So in the previous example, I said it was a mixed ability 8th grade group. I wanted to be sure they had opportunities to collaborate and communicate with each other. And then I gave also the context of the exact standard that I wanted to teach. And that is how you get targeted results that really help you and work for you. You might have noticed also in the previous example, I started off with assigning the AI a role. Because the AI has trained on so much data, it's millions and millions of bytes of data. It really helps to target a particular field of study or particular field of knowledge. And so when you assign it a role, that's what it does. And so telling it in the previous prompt that it was an expert mathematician that was skilled at simplifying complex problems gives it the information that it needs to target more specifically on. And so you do need to assign a role most often. It will be what I always tell people is if you think about whatever task you're trying to accomplish, if you could have anybody in the world do it for you, who would that be? And that would be the role that you would want to assign it in most cases. Next is the audience, which of course, if you're a teacher, a lot of times the audience for what you're creating is going to be your students. And so the more context and information about your students that you can give, the more specifically it will personalize the instruction to them. And you can do this at a class level, but you can also do it at a single individual student level. And so if you have one single student that you're trying to create something for, you can give specific details about that student. Of course, no personal information, but you could say, for example, I have a fourth grade rambunctious student who is severely ADHD and has a hard time focusing on long projects. I want to give him some sample problems that will engage his interests. He's very interested in Minecraft, and I also want to give him frequent feedback, and so that he stays interested. So you could give real specific feedback or real specific context about a student without giving any personally identifiable information. And then the resulting output would be very targeted to that student's needs. Another thing that you can specify, if you like, is the format. It does not always just have to be sentences or paragraphs or an email. You can get creative with this. You can ask for poems, haikus, rap songs, whatever you want to ask for. It will even do code for you. It will do spreadsheet formulas. And so you can be specific about length. You can use word counts, but I will tell you that this one thing that generative AI models cannot do is count words. And so it will give a kind of if you ask it for a 500 word essay as opposed to 1,000 word, the 1,000 word will probably be a little longer, but if you paste that into a Google Doc and do a word count, you'll find that the word count is not correct because that's just one thing that they can't do. But you can say, 1 page, 2 or 3 paragraphs. You can give it some generic length statements as well. The most important thing is the task, which is when you're assigning it a job, you're telling it what action you want it to complete for you. And so in the last one, I said, create a lesson plan. And so that's the task that I'm giving it. Optional is tone. You don't have to specify a tone, but sometimes you may want to, especially in email communication, especially like email communication with a parent. You might want to be specific about the tone, that you want it to be a professional yet caring tone or a concerned. So that is an option if you want to do it. And so we're going to look at a couple of examples in a minute, but I want to dig into the context piece a little more, because really this is the most powerful thing about your prompt is the amount of context and the kind of context you give it. And so these are some different things that can be included in the context. First of all, learning objective. A standard or a rubric. As I saw in the last one, I put an actual standard in there, standard course of study objective. But you can also, if you're using it for evaluation purposes, you can paste a rubric in and say, based on this rubric, what would you evaluate this essay? Things like that. You can also, if you want work, you can do time spans, but it's another thing that generative AI doesn't do great at is time spans. So for example, like in that one, I put a 60-minute lesson. As teacher, you would have to be the judge of what your students can do in 60 minutes, because I do find that managing time spans or estimating time spans is not a strength of generative AI models. But desired groupings is another great thing. Like if you want an activity for small groups of 3 or 4, or if you want a think, pair, share activity, a whole group activity, individual activity, examples, those are things that you can tell in your prompt, and it will help kind of make sure that the output is best for that. Reading levels and Lexile levels, this is a great way of differentiating content, is to specify that you want it in a lower reading level. You can say third grade, for example, or you can actually give it a Lexile level. And it is really good at that, at changing a piece of text that maybe you copied in a piece of text and you ask it to, and you ask it then to make a copy of it in a lower reading level or simplifying vocabulary, things like that. Student capability levels. In that last one, I said, it's a mixed ability group, but you can adjust that as well. And this is one thing that I love too about these models is they know all of our acronyms that we use in education, that other people look at you like you've grown an extra horn on your head when you mention like Bloom's or DOK or any of that stuff. But you can use that terminology with these models and it will understand what you mean and it can apply the results to that. And then also, I always add collaboration, critical thinking, creativity, things like that to my prompts to make sure that they are helping to reinforce those very important durable skills. Okay, so I'm going to give you a few more prompting tips, and then we're going to do some live prompting. So this is one important tip, and this is why I've changed the title of this slide, this presentation to the power of prompting instead of just the power of the prompt. Because if all you do is put in the prompt, one prompt, and you stop there, you're missing a lot of the power of these models because they're very conversational. And when you get a result from them, you need to evaluate it and you need to be asking for corrections if there's anything you don't like about it, additions, or you can ask for other things that go along with it. And so it's like a conversation. You want to carry on a conversation with the model. If you're in the same topic, you haven't changed topic, you just carry that on in the same chat. But if you have a new topic, you want to start a new chat. And so sometimes you have to refine a prompt several times to get what you want, exactly what you want. Okay, this is something that I always forget to tell people, so I added a slide to remind me to tell you first. In any of these models, if you just hit enter, it's going to submit your prompt and you may not be ready. So if you want to add lines, say, for example, to copy in a standard or something like that, then you need to put shift and enter, and that works in whatever model you're using. Shift and enter will give you an extra line. And then chunking is really important. So when you are working with these models, if you start, like if you want a lesson plan for a 90-minute class, you'll get much better results if you build it out piece by piece than if you just say from the beginning, create a lesson plan. That tends to be more generic. But what I would do, for example, for a communication skills lesson, I would give it instructions for building my introduction activity. So maybe I would give it a prompt to create a 5-minute introduction activity that was a critical thinking question. And then when I got that perfected the way I wanted it, I would ask for corrections if needed. Then I would say, okay, now I want a vocabulary list, and I would give it parameters for that. Again, I would evaluate it and perfect it. And then I could say, okay, now with those vocabulary words, I want you to create some fill in the blank sentences and so forth, and go all the way through until I have everything I want for that 90-minute lesson. And then at the end, you can say, okay, now put all of that into a 90-minute lesson. And I've found that the results are much better when I do that. And also in this bubble here, just kind of a little fun fact, if you're doing really complex prompting, there's been studies done that the models will perform much better if you tell them to take a deep breath, slow down, and work it out step by step. And so that's kind of creepy and cool at the same time, but that has been proven to be true. Okay, another thing that I want to talk about before we actually get into our first live prompt is that always, every time that you are using an AI model, there's some steps that you need to go through after you finish prompting to be sure that you are using it responsibly. And one is you always have to evaluate what it gives you, obviously. Sometimes it might not meet your intended purpose. Sometimes you might have to adjust your prompt a little, but you need to make sure that you are evaluating it. And then you need to verify facts and figures because they are prone to hallucinations. All of them are. They're getting less prone all the time to hallucinations, and the more premium models will hallucinate less than the cheaper models, but they all have the potential of doing that. So we have to watch for that. Edit your prompt and ask follow-up questions as we've just discussed. You're having this conversation with the model. But then when you get a result, like an email in particular, or a letter or something like that, I've never used exactly what it's given me. I always revise it and put my own voice into it, make sure it reflects my style. And that's an important thing to do. And so that revise, that's the R, and every is revise. And then lastly, you just have to make sure you remember that you're the human, and as the human, you're the one that's responsible for the outcome, whatever the model, whatever you create with the model, whatever you share, you have the responsibility. You can't blame the AI for it. And then also we need to be transparent, and we'll look at disclosing use at the end of the presentation today. Okay, so we're going to get to some prompting, but first of all, there is a worksheet that the lovely Stacy has created and I've edited to death. But I'm going to have you open that Google Doc that is on the current slide that I'm on, which is slide 15. If you don't mind to open that Google Doc, it'll save you a lot of time in the prompting phase, because there'll be some copy and pasting prompts that you can use. You can copy instead of having to type them out. And so when you open that doc, it will force you to make a copy of it. And I'm going to give you just a second to give everybody a chance to get it open. And while you're doing that, I will just kind of review it for just a minute. First of all, it has that craft poster on it. And then it has some little quick starter prompts, which I'm actually going to skip those for this group, because this group, I don't think we have any brand new beginners. So for the time, we're going to skip that and just go straight into the number 2, the role play. And I'm going to look at that role play piece, and then so you can just copy straight from this document into the model, and then you can edit where it has the brackets and add your own information. And we'll go through several of these prompts. So if you've had an opportunity to open that, then we'll move on to the next thing. And I'm going to be using ChatGPT today. You're welcome to use any of the models that you want, but if you haven't used ChatGPT in the last week or so, I encourage you to do so, because it had a huge update last week. And now everybody, even on the free plan, has access to a really powerful model called GPT 4.0 as an Omni. And so if you haven't used it lately, I would encourage you to do that. You'll see some new features there, like the ability to upload and just some more powerful models. So I'm going to go into ChatGPT. We never know what people will be able to access based on the school. And so you're welcome to use any of these other models if you can't use that ChatGPT, or if you just want to try something different. And so when you open one of the models, then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to start with a role play prompt. And I have an example here on the screen. And then I showed you already on the Google Doc where the copy and paste version is. But talking about the role feature a little bit, a lot of times it's not going to be really creative. A lot of times it's just going to be a role that reflects what your job is, like an expert teacher or an excellent biologist or mathematician, something like that. But sometimes this feature can be used to do some really fun and creative things. And so, as an example, I was a language arts teacher, and one of my favorite books to teach to my 8th grade was The Giver. And so I did a role play prompt here, and I gave the prompt: for this activity, you will take on the role of Jonas from the novel The Giver. I'll ask you questions and you'll answer in the voice of Jonas. Stay true to the events of the novel. Answer one question at a time as I ask it. Here's my first question. And then I'll just kind of scroll through here, and you can see, first of all, that it started giving me the wrong tense. And so I immediately corrected it. I said, okay, no, but I want to use present tense. And then it re-corrected and it started again. And it takes on the voice of Jonas, and it answered my questions. And this is a really, really long prompt. I spent way more time than I should have, having a really good time engaging with the AI here, but it was remarkable. And this was 3.5. This was before I had access to 4.0. But it did a really phenomenal job of capturing the essence of the story, the essence of Jonas's character, tapping into all of the themes of the novel. And it was a really good way for a student to interact with a piece of literature or with a historical figure, a character from a book, person in a job or a career, person living in a different time or place. Lots of different potential uses for this. And so what I would like for you to do, we're going to do a little live prompting. And no matter what role you are in, this can apply to your role. Even if you are a PE teacher, you could assign it the role of a coach or a physical therapist or something like that, a famous athlete. If you're a music teacher, you could assign it a musician and interview a musician. It could be Beethoven, an artist, whatever you want to. But I'd like for you to think of something that kind of relates to your role and copy and paste that prompt from the Google Doc right here into the model, and then fill in the spaces with something that relates to your role. And then we're going to take about 3 or 4 minutes and let you do a prompt and then interact with it by asking a question or two. And it is important that you include the second line, answer one question at a time as I ask it. That's an important part of it to make sure that it doesn't, otherwise it might just give you a 2 or 3 page blurb right off the bat. So I'm going to be quiet for a minute and have some awkward silence while you're working on that. Lindsay wants to sing us a song. She can do that.
I will not today, but maybe tomorrow.
I'm telling Canva to play a song, but I don't hear it playing. There we go. Can y'all hear that?
Yep.
Is that more annoying than helpful? For some reason, my counter is not counting down, so I'm trying to just watch my clock, and I think it's been about 3 minutes. That piece is not working for me. Take just another minute, and then we'll give you an opportunity to share if anybody would like to share. And if you know how and want to drop the link to your chat in the chat here, you can. The link to your prompt in chat. I don't know why this thing's not counting down. Okay, so that was the end of the time. And again, I would like to have opportunity to hear from some of you. It's not a big group. If anybody wants to come off mute and just briefly tell us about what you did. But another option, if you don't know how to share a chat in ChatGPT, is to just go up to the upper right-hand corner and click that right there. And then it will give you a link to copy, and you could drop a link to the chat, to your ChatGPT chat in the chat box. Google Gemini used to let you share chats, and for some reason they took that away. I've complained incessantly, and they haven't added it back yet. It does, if you're using Perplexity, Perplexity does allow you to share as well. There's a share button on Perplexity as well. Anybody want to share what your prompt was?
And if you are having a hard time unmuting yourself, if you want to raise your hand, I can unmute you as well.
Hey, nobody wants to share. We're going to move ahead. I don't want to move too quickly. So if you do want to, I'd love to hear from you. Okay, great. We have somebody super simple answer. As if you're Ida Lovelace, you come to the future. Okay, did it turn out well? Did you get the chance to evaluate it and see if it was accurate? And we have Leah. This time it worked. Okay, I'm glad to see that, Leah. You will see that it is much better now than it was 2 weeks ago. The 4.0 model is much more powerful. And so Melissa said hers was great, worked out great, and used Copilot. Okay. Now, Copilot, I think, will let you share as well. At least the last time I checked, I'd have to look back. I haven't used it a lot lately. Seems accurate. Gave 2 references, double checked. Okay, great. Okay, I'm glad. It seems like that worked out for most of you, and I'm happy to hear that. But the one person who mentioned how it worked this time, ChatGPT didn't work before. If you tried something before in ChatGPT and gave up on it, I would encourage you to try it again, because I have found it to be much more powerful since the 4.0 model rolled out. And some of those features are still kind of rolling out slowly, like the access to GPT still hasn't rolled out to most people. I have access now to the Mac app. Some people don't. If you use it on your phone and a phone app, you probably have access to the very conversational mode that they rolled out last week as well. And so I would encourage you to kind of revisit it if you haven't looked at it recently. I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next slide. I do want to mention this about role plays. Role plays are a fantastic tool to use in the classroom in a lot of different ways, but there are some things that we need to make sure we remember when we're using them. One, in my opinion, I feel like students should have at least a basic level of AI literacy before they're interacting with any AI, even as a bot like shared from school AI or anything else. And so if your students have no idea what AI is, they have no idea how it works, any of that, I would encourage you to first give them some AI literacy training. There's a lot of resources we share in our AI guidelines to help you with that. And then before you interact with or have them interact with one of these bots. And in my personal opinion, elementary school students don't have the cognitive ability, especially younger elementary, to truly understand what AI is. And so I personally would steer away from using AI with them, even in a teacher-directed activity that wasn't really breaking the law. But the next is to be sure they're aware they're interacting with the AI chatbot, not a real person. So for example, don't say, I invited Harriet Tubman to join us today. She's going to chat with us. I would, you need to be very forthright that it is an AI chatbot that is going to take on the role of Harriet Tubman or whoever it may be. And then guide students in evaluating it. Make sure that they're thinking critically about the results, to see if it's accurate based on either the novel, the historical context, whatever the case may be, and also evaluating it for a bias, if there's any bias or if maybe they don't agree that person would have said those things. And so invite them to use some critical thinking to evaluate it. And if it's a historical person, I would even encourage you to pull in some primary sources and things like that and have them check against the primary sources or historical documents. I think that's a good way to kind of do the best of both worlds. Okay, now the next thing, I have a couple of example prompts here, and then we're going to do some more prompting. This is one that I really liked, and I'm going to redo it in ChatGPT for Omni. I haven't since Omni came out, so this is in the 3.5. But this is a fourth grade teacher. You're a fourth grade math teacher. Create 10 word problems to help students practice a particular standard. And notice here, I've actually listed the standard in the document, but I also copied and pasted the standard in again. That is best practice if you know you're working with a Yeah, and as Josh said, chatbots do have terms and conditions that limit the age of 13, but some tools like School AI, technically the students don't have to create accounts. And so, that one is kind of a little more not so black and white. I've heard of people using those with younger children. I'm just particularly not a fan of that. I feel like students need to be at least middle school age to have the comprehension of what AI is. But definitely any of the tools that you're creating accounts on, pretty much all of them, you got to be at least 13, some 18. Okay, so next on this, I've asked it to use a fun, engaging tone, and I've also asked it to get to use references from the Minecraft game to engage them. And I'm going to open that one if it will open for me. Open it in a new tab, and I'm just going to kind of go through that a little bit, that prompt a little bit. Oh, and I guess my prompt died. I guess I'm gonna have to redo that one. Sorry. But I have a new example that I did a couple days ago of the same one. I was gonna pull it up because I do like the way that I had done some things in it. I had a lot more developed prompt. So I do have it in Omni. I just haven't relinked it. And so there's my prompt, the exact prompt. And so here it gives me the 10 word problems. And it does a really good job of pulling in those Minecraft references. It does a really good job of addressing the exact standard. And so I've got my 10 problems, and as teacher, I would definitely evaluate those. I would work every single one of them, and I would make sure that they both teach the standard, they're, the right level for my students and all of that, if I were the teacher. But then I have mine also trying to give me a summary of the takeaways, and so it gives me that. But then I said, okay, now I want a teacher guide with the solutions. And so it gives me worked solutions for all of them. And so this is just kind of to demonstrate the interaction that you can have back and forth with the bot. But I'm also going to ask for something else. I'm going to say, now give me 3 challenge problems. And notice I don't have to repeat all of the context that I've already given it. In the same chat, it holds all of that in memory. And so it knows what I'm talking about. It knows I want Minecraft references. It knows the standard. It knows all of that. So then it produces these 3 challenge problems. And this time it went ahead and gave me a solution because it's smart enough to know I'm probably going to ask for that next. And so it gave me a solution for them. But I could continue on. I could say, now create 5 hands-on activities to reinforce this concept. I have Legos and craft supplies. So you can give it context like that too, to make sure that it's not going to give you hands-on activities for things that you don't have. And so it gives me Lego castle construction, and it tells me how they relate to Minecraft, how it relates to that particular standard. And you can keep going with this. So I could continue on, and I could say, now give me an exit ticket. Now I need a quick exit ticket. I'm going to type while it's still producing. And it's on activity 5. And so it does a really good job. And again, I'm not going through the evaluation step because of our time restraints, but it does a really good job of giving me all of that information. And I feel pretty confident that it will be good, but I would evaluate it if I was the teacher. And so now I've asked for an exit ticket. And so I'm building these things piece by piece. And then I'm going to say, okay, now if I can type, which I can't, now put this all into a 60-minute lesson plan. And I'm going to do that, and it will take everything that it's already created for me. I create it piece by piece, perfect it as I go, and then it will create it into a lesson plan, allotting time. And again, as teacher, you'll have to really verify the time restraints. You'll know much better than ChatGPT what your kids can do in any certain length of time, but it does a pretty good job anyway. And so I just wanted to share that as an example that kind of demonstrates a lot of the tips that I've given you on engaging with the model in conversation, interacting with it, follow-up questions, and then working things out step by step, building things step by step. Okay, now the next thing on this next page here, there are 4 different prompts. One is English, one's science, one is computer science, and well, this one is English, so we actually have 2 English. And there are several others on the Google Doc as well. There are several to pick from. There are 10 there. But what I would like for you to do is pick one of these prompts or make up one of your own if you just want to start from scratch and kind of follow that model of assigning a role, giving it context, giving details about the audience, giving it a task. And then we're going to have another live prompting session for about 3 minutes and let you create a prompt that will hopefully address something that in your class or in your situation that you may be able to use. And so I'm going to set the timer again for 3 minutes. And again, I would like for you to be able to hear, not 99 minutes. We're not going to do that. So 3 minutes, and go ahead and do some prompting. Okay, Lisa, it sounds like you've ran into a limit on the new version of ChatGPT. There is a limit on the number of 4.0 chats, but I'm pointing at the screen now where you can change the model. I found that mine will automatically change back to 3.5 when I run out of my 4.0 chats, but it is limiting currently to 15 chats a day, I think it is on the 4.0 model. So you might just go underneath there and change it to 3.5 and see if it'll work for you. Let me know if that works for you. If not, you may have to switch to a different model. Okay, so you haven't gotten access to 4.0 yet? I thought it had rolled out to everyone. That's the first person I've heard that hasn't gotten access to it. And I've never ran into a daily limit on the 3.5 version before. So maybe they've changed something else that I'm not aware of. If I were you, I would just switch to Gemini if you have access, or Perplexity for the remainder of the session. Okay, time's up on that one. We only have about 12 minutes left. So if anybody does want to share the link to their chat that they created with that one, or one of those options that we had in the chat, then please feel free to drop it in the chat. I am going to keep moving because our time is running short. And so this is kind of what we just did. And we explored that guided practice. I just jumped the gun on that one. But I do want to give you a couple of other tips to help you with your prompting. And so this slide kind of describes 2 things that will really help. One is if you find that your ChatGPT, whatever model, Gemini that you're using, isn't doing things the way you want them done. So for example, one day I was asking it to create analogies. and it just wasn't formatting them the way I wanted. And so you can put things in delimiters, which most people use triple quotations. I've found single quotations work pretty well as well. But if you put them in, so I could say, for example, I want you to format it like this, and then put that into triple quotations, an example for it to go by. That really helps to make sure that it is formatting things the way that you want it to do. And so using examples and delimiters is one prompting tip. Another one is providing reference materials. And so, for example, if I were going to ask my students a question on a poem, I could just reference the name of the poem, but if I can actually paste the text of the poem into the chat or the short story or the article or whatever, it's going to target that piece of reference instead of just the entire body of knowledge it has. And it tends to be much more accurate when you do that. For the models that have a live internet connection, which is not ChatGPT, the free version, but like Gemini, Perplexity, Microsoft Copilot, for those, you can also use a URL as a text. And so, for example, I have an article here, climate change article from National Geographic. If I want to go into Gemini, I can't do it in ChatGPT because it can't access the internet. But if I want to copy that URL, I can copy the URL. I can go into Gemini, and what I've done here is I've said create 10 comprehension questions on this article, and I just pasted the link in there. This also works in Gemini on a YouTube video. So you can put a YouTube video link in there. If it has closed captioning, which most of them do, it will actually create questions from a YouTube video or give you a summary of a YouTube video. And so using a URL for a reference is also a good tip that works for some of them. All of them you can paste in text. For if you have the new version, the 4.0 version of ChatGPT, which apparently everybody does not, since Lisa does not. But when you get that one, it also has an upload button, and you can upload files, but there's a limit. I think I ran into a limit at 5 the other day. You can upload PDFs, Excel files, images. Other models do allow you to upload, though. For one, Claude lets you upload up to 5 files. Perplexity will let you upload 1 at a time. And so you can actually upload a file and then reference it as well. And that just helps it target the information to what you're looking at. I do have a spreadsheet that I've added here because the models are all different. And this is something I try to keep up to date. I updated it last week. Before that, I'd gotten kind of behind on updating it. But it will just kind of help you as you learn these, because they're all different. They're different tools. And so sometimes you might have a use case that ChatGPT, the free version, will work fine for. Another time, maybe you need to upload several files and do a comparison between them. Then you would need to use Claude and so forth. So if you need a live internet connection, then you would want to use Gemini or Perplexity. So this is something you can just reference. And then I also add just kind of some things that I like about the different models. There's some little tips here about using the new versions of ChatGPT as well. And so I just want to leave that with you as kind of something you can refer back to. But I also want to talk just a minute about image generation, because image generation is very fun, and it's something that you cannot do with the free version of ChatGPT, even on the upgraded version, but you can do it in Gemini. You should be able to do it in Microsoft Copilot. However, today it kept telling me that it couldn't do that. But you can also do it in like Canva. Canva has an image generator app. You can do it in Adobe Firefly, Adobe Express. There's several tools that you can generate images. Ideogram is one as well. But I'm going to just look at Gemini for a minute. So these are 4 different examples. And I had at the top there the age limits. But the next page, and I have copied these prompts into the document as well. Down near the bottom, there's some image prompts into the Google Doc. But these are images that I created, all of these from Gemini, using these 4 prompts. So I have the 4 prompts there. I do have a note here. You may or may not heard that Google had a really big incident a few weeks ago with trying to make their model less prejudiced, and they actually made it more racist. And so they've made it now this you can't generate images of people, and so that will be a limit that you'll have. You can't ask it to generate anything that is a person. But I'm sorry I keep doing that. But I'm going to go into Gemini and just I'm going to go to the Google document first, and I'm going to just take one of those. You can definitely type your own image if you want, but I'm just going to copy that last one, kind of an imitation of a starry night, and it's down at the bottom in number 5. But I'm going to go into Gemini, and you may or may not be able to use Gemini on your school account. That depends on whether your Google administrator has allowed it, but you can go into it on a personal account, just gemini.google.com. And then I'm going to start a new chat, and I'm just going to paste that exact same image in there, except for I'm going to have use bright colors of greens, purples, and blues, because that one was kind of bland. It didn't have much color in it. And then I'm going to hit enter. And it will create for me 4 versions of that image. And then it will ask me, do I want it to create some more? And so this is a really powerful tool for teachers as well, because I know myself, I spent a million hours as a teacher Googling for images and trying to find just the right image to work for things that I wanted to create. And then I had to worry about copyright. Was it a copyright friendly image or whatever? With these tools, you can just create your own images for your slide decks or whatever you want. And those are beautiful, gorgeous images. I'm gonna have to use those somewhere. But I could ask it to generate more as well. And it does a really good job. And again, Copilot is supposed to do this, but today it just wouldn't work for me. So I didn't include it in today's lesson. But other tools that I've mentioned, Canva, Google, Adobe Firefly, Adobe Express, Ideogram is one. Google Labs has one called Imagen 3 or something like that. And so you can create images that you can then take and use. And so any one of these that I want, I can download that full size image. I might even put some of these on my wall. Those are really nice. I like those. And so I want to give you just a couple of minutes. We only have 4 minutes left, but take about 2 minutes and copy one of those prompts and edit it the way you want, and try creating an image. And if you want to share your image, drop that in the chat. And then at 4:28, we'll do the final wrap up at the end, get the evaluation. You do need to stick around for the feedback form, because that's how you get your certificate for attending today. And we'll do that in the last couple of minutes. Okay, I got that started a little late, so I'm going to go ahead and stop it a little early. Hopefully you got a chance to create some images. I would love to be able to see them. If you want to share well, you can't share the link to the chat anymore in Gemini, so you can't really drop an image into the chat here either. So I guess I should have shared a Padlet or something for you to share those images on. But if you haven't discovered that before, it is a great way to create some images, and I encourage you to check out some of those other image generators as well. But I think Google does a pretty good job with it. And the last few things I want to cover, if we had more time, I would actually have you go and explore this site on your own, but I really encourage, if you haven't seen it, to bookmark it, because it has over 100 sample prompts that you can use. And just like we've been doing today, you can copy and edit those and use them. And there are a lot of great use cases there on this website. So I encourage you to bookmark that site. We will have to skip that. This is some information about citing, and I will have to just allow you to read that over on your own today as well. Most of the time you can just have a statement of use, just like I've done in my slides on here, saying I use this tool and created it, and that's generally good enough. But if you need to cite, there's information there on how to do it. I do want to encourage you to sign up for further webinars, and also to return to this website for the recordings and the presentations. We're putting them all on there as we do them. And also, if you're not familiar with our guidelines, I really encourage you to read them. It's not a very long document, 39 pages with a lot of images, but it's really well worth reading and sharing out. We have gone right past the Q&A time, but I do want to make sure I have the feedback slide here for you to see. And because that is how you get your credit. And Stacy has also dropped it in the chat. And so the last couple of things, I do want to point out that this slide deck, if you want to take it and use it in your district to train others or whatever, this slide after the feedback has a link where you can make a copy of it in Canva. And it will give you your own copy that then you can download. And this slide right here kind of gives you walk through, if you're not familiar with Canva, on how to download it as a PowerPoint or a PDF or whatever you want to download it as, so that you can then take it and make it your own and use it to train others. And that is our time for the day. I'll stay on for a couple of minutes if anybody has a question, but I don't want to make you feel like you have to stay on because it's 1 minute past 4:30 already. But I think PSU, I'm sorry, Public School Unit. That's it's all charters, all districts in North Carolina. Thank you, Lynn. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Hopefully you will get to explore some more later and practice your prompting some more.